I have an incredible entrepreneur, and now I'm his biggest fan, Gabi Lewis, co-founder of the Magic Spoon, which has been my sustenance through the holidays. I had a whole big case sent to me, and I'm like, "What is this? The Magic Spoon?" And before I gave it to my kids, I started looking into it. I said, "Wait, hold on a second. This is a great gift for me." Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Dave Meltzer. But I found a cereal that tastes better than my favorite cereals, and it's actually healthy. Now, the idea seems obvious, Gabby, and I know you've had other startups and other businesses that you've been involved with. But how do we take an obvious idea of saying, what if I could make this delicious cereal healthy for people? How do you take that idea and bring it to fruition?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me here.
Of course,
And
thank
I
you.
think the first step for us with an obvious idea is to ask, well, if it's so obvious, why hasn't it been done before? And maybe there's a reason. So when we first had the idea of creating a cereal that looks and tastes like all your childhood favorites, but it's actually really good for you, we thought, why has nobody done this before? And so we started asking various entrepreneurs and investors and food industry veterans, why is there no cereal with upgraded nutritionals that tastes like it's sugary? Because you've seen that happen in ice cream, in beverages, and soda, in every category, but you hadn't seen it in cereal. And so we started asking around and we got various answers. People told us, oh, well, the big cereal companies, they'll crush you. You can't get shelf space. Or they told us nobody would ever pay more money for a healthy cereal because it's such a cheap product. We got all these answers. None of them we thought were any good. And so we thought, all right, let's start this business ourselves.
And once you decide to start that business, you have to capitalize it. And you've had some experience in that. When you're capitalizing a business with what is a difficult idea, because your immediate question is, number one, why haven't they done it before? Obviously there's so many big conglomerates out there. If this could be done or would have been done, why wasn't it done? How did you overcome that objection? It was one thing to get started, but overcome to capitalize your company to actually create the business that you have.
So that particular objection of why haven't the large companies done it, we actually didn't hear as much because in the food industry, the large companies actually don't do that much.
They just
And
acquire
what
you.
they acquire you or they copy you. They're never the first. In fact, one of our unnamed biggest three cereal company competitors just launched a healthier cereal recently, sort of in the vein of Magic Spoon. So after a year of success, it's sort of inevitable one of the big companies will try and make their own. Typically, it folds a year later because they don't know how to market it. But we actually didn't hear that as much as we heard, can you charge that much more of a premium over regular cereal? Because regular cereal, it's $2 a box. It was designed as the cheapest form of food devoid of any nutrition you can really imagine. It's 20 cents a serving. It's unreal. And every ingredient is basically a microcosm of what's wrong with our food system, right? It's subsidized corn, it's high fructose corn syrup, it's cane sugar, it's all these ingredients that, we don't need to get into the politics of it, but cereal represents all of that bad stuff. And what we were suggesting was that people might pay two, three, four times that price for a healthier option. And we got some pushback to that idea. What we were able to do though was point rather to these other categories as comps. So you can see in everything from natural deodorant to cold pressed juice to low sugar ice cream, people have historically shown that they actually are okay paying two, three, four times the price of the terrible alternative for something that's meaningfully, not just incrementally better. And so what we were creating was a cereal that wasn't just a little bit healthier, because that already existed. There are already organic cereals, there's quote unquote natural cereals. What we were trying to create was a cereal that is 10 times more protein, 7 times less carbohydrates, zero sugar, massively healthier. And eventually we convinced enough people that consumers would be willing to pay for that.
And they are. But one of the other difficulties that you have in having a great product is employees and overhead. And especially considering the pandemic and where you go, where we're going, you've been able to double your size. You've been able to increase your distribution through what originally started as what was going to be a lockdown on distribution of, toilet paper, cereal, and every other commodity that we had. How were you able to, number one, create that type of growth with a CPG product where you have to interact, with the grocery stores for the placement, marketing, advertising, and influence that you need?
Well, firstly, it's not lost on us how lucky we are, right? We're
Well,
creating
you're called Magic Spoon.
there
Right? I
you
mean,
go.
let's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're selling shelf stable packaged foods. We actually only sell it online as well, and it's light to ship. So it's really like, if you'd sat down pre-pandemic and thought, what is the ultimate business to be pandemic proof? This might be one of the handful of ideas you'd come up with. So we're deeply grateful, and acknowledge that it's all luck, obviously, but we're taking advantage of it. I think we did a few things early on, one of which was we started leaning more and more into certain advertising channels that we realized were going to be more effective during this time. So we'd done a little bit of influencer marketing beforehand. We sort of noticed early on everyone was spending more time on their phones, and influencers were stuck at home not being able to go out to create content. So they were happier to get a box of cereal shipped to their house and create some content around that, as opposed to going to the beach or doing something else. So from both the consumer's perspective and the influencer's perspective, we started leading harder and harder into that channel. Same thing for podcast advertising, actually. And what we saw is that even though there was a period where podcast listenership on average was down because people weren't commuting, that meant that the prices were decreased sort of even more proportionally than the listenership was down. So there was some arbitrage there. We leaned in heavily. And so we looked at different marketing channels in similar ways and were able to sort of capitalize there. There were, of course, some struggles, not only sort of within the company in terms of how do you build a culture remotely, which is very hard. I'm not sure anyone's really figured out how to build an amazing culture when people are just staring into a screen. And I don't think anybody really enjoys a Zoom happy hour, but that's sort of the best tool we've got these days. And then, things like trying to work with the warehouse when inevitably workers there are called in sick, ditto for our manufacturing facility. So definitely some small struggles, but we've been able to sort of come through this in a very strong way. Like you mentioned, we've grown our team quite drastically. We are, I believe, 16 people today, and we were 5 back in March. So a little over tripled our headcount since March, and done that actually without meeting most of the people, which is wild.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, the other aspect of your business that I found when I received the Magic Spoon product was I knew it was going to be successful because people buy on emotion for logical reasons. Now, you might have been aligned or synergistic to the aspects of the pandemic and how and what goods are purchased and how they're purchased and delivered, and even the weight of the product. But the emotional attachment when I opened, because I had no idea what was in the outer box, right? Because I had like 5 different cereals in there. I got a feeling. And being more a scientist of sales, someone who is 35 years in marketing and developing this type of opportunity, there was an energy that came about me that really said to me, oh my God, people are going to love this. What is it about this cereal that you have, the Magic Spoon? What are the aspects of it that make you feel emotionally attached to your product?
Well, I don't want to take the credit for this because it's not just Magic Spoon cereal, it's cereal, period. And as much as we hate on the big evil cereal companies that feed all the kids of America tons of sugar, they're incredible marketers. And they sort of paved the way for us, right? Most people, regardless of your age right now, you have very fond memories of growing up, eating a bowl of cereal, watching cartoons. And those memories are deep. And if you can recreate that feeling in a way that allows people to indulge in cereal without the guilt, then, like you said, you create that moment where people get transported back to their childhood. They feel warm and fuzzy. They're not stressed about going to work the next day because they just have a delicious bowl of cereal that happens to be really healthy as well. So from a packaging perspective, we created characters for our boxes that are slightly psychedelic and grown up. So they're a nod to childhood cereal characters, but they're not too childish at the same time. And of course, our flavors, fruity, frosted, they all harken back as these childlike, sugary flavors, despite the fact there's no sugar there.
It is amazing because, you think about, not to utilize a competitor's tagline, right? Magically delicious. But the first thing that came to mind was, all right, I remember there was a muffin story about Starbucks with the first fat-free muffins that they sold. And these women were just going crazy over these fat-free muffins that they sold at Starbucks. And in the end, they found out every woman was gaining weight, and they couldn't understand why. It's because the ingredients were not what she said they were, and they weren't fat-free. And so people were pounding these things thinking they're fat-free, which they've done with portions too, like the chocolate brittle that they sell. They give you such small portions, you think like each huge piece only has 35 calories, but it's like a tiny bite. When I first started eating it, I literally almost said your tagline. I'm like, okay, this is too good to be true. After years of like walking, everyone's done this, by the way, right? We walk by the pantry, it's 8 at night, I eat dinner early, and I see the cereal there, and I'm like, oh, I'll just take a handful. Right? And you're like, I can't, because
Now you can.
Now you can, right? And you don't have to get crap from your wife either, because you're like, oh, come on, I'm just protein loading for my workout in the morning. I'll be ready to go. But it really does taste too good to be true. That could not have been easy to do, because if it was, everybody would have done it. What type of process or research did you have to do to get something to taste that good, that is so good for you?
It took time, and it took experimenting with essentially every protein powder there is, every natural sweetener there is. We went into it with certain somewhat, vague parameters, right? We wanted sugar to be less than 3 or 4 grams per serving. We wanted protein to be more than 10 grams per serving, net carbs less than 5 or 6. Then within those parameters, we had some ingredients that we absolutely did not want to use. So no artificial sweeteners, no sugar alcohols, no corn syrup, list goes on. And then from there, the question was basically, how delicious can we make it while still staying within those parameters? And we knew we wouldn't be able to get 100% as delicious as sugary cereal, but we think we got pretty close. And, depending on who you ask, maybe it's 80, 90, 95% as good as regular cereal, but so much healthier that it's worth that little sacrifice.
Now, you are an Ivy League guy, academic, an economics person, and your first venture with your co-founder was more on the insect proteins of crickets, which I love, by the way. And I know they haven't caught on quite as well in America as Magic Spoon, but I'm a big fan of the insect protein as well. But the nuance is interesting, because all my siblings went to the Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Penn, Columbia, cousins at Brown, just a little bit older than you. And there seems to be this divergent population in the Ivy Leagues. I find that there's an extraordinary academic, well-trained contingency of my Ivy League friends that, have this critical analysis and the ability to, transform academically books that they've read. But there's also this blend of the hyper entrepreneurial that can understand the academic side of things, but blend it into an emotional or adaptable intelligence. And both the businesses, the one that you started with Greg in 2013 with the insect protein, but especially Magic Spoon, to me, shows an extraordinary emotional intelligence. You've been around the Ivy Leaguers more than me. I just have resentment because they kept rejecting me for undergrad and law school. And my siblings rub it in every chance they get. But moreover, I've, use this nuance of emotional intelligence that, maybe I didn't study hard enough, or I'm not as good as a student, but I'm just as intelligent as you. Since you have the duality, where do you see the value as an entrepreneur in the academic side of what you really excelled at, but beyond this emotional intelligence that you obviously have as well?
Wow, that's an amazing question. Nobody's ever asked me before.
That's what I'm going for. There we go. Redemption. Dave Meltzer redemption here on the Playbook.
It's funny. I majored in economics and philosophy, and I think the philosophy has been more helpful than the economics. The economics I studied was very academic, very abstract, doesn't really translate to the real world. But the philosophy, it's all about just asking big questions and thinking critically. And I think that's what you need to figure out, firstly, what idea is worth pursuing, why even pursue it in the first place, and then what are the steps you take to sort of bring that into the world. It's just thinking logically about if this, then that, which you certainly don't need an Ivy League degree for. I think, for being honest, I think what the Ivy League helps with more than anything is the network, right? Which is, it's not good, and I wish this wasn't the case, but it makes it easier to get certain introductions or get to certain people. The way the world is, unfortunately, right now. So I think that's sort of more helpful than the actual training itself, which likewise I think is what most people say of business school. I've never been, but everyone I talk to says you don't learn that much, but it's a lot of fun and you make amazing connections. So I think it's sort of, yeah.
You nailed it. I talk about my law school, and I had more fun at law school than I did in undergrad, and the network is the most critical. And I think today, the networking capabilities of academic institutions will save the large institutions from, we're going to go from B school to E school. I'm already being hit up, for these huge conglomerate professorships of, e-commerce and marketing and sports agentry, all the expertise that I've gained over the years to be virtual. But yet I think, and I send all my kids to colleges for that experiential side, but moreover to the networking of what you get with the emotional attachment of alumni, whether you went to Brown or Tulane like me, it wouldn't matter. The networks are essential. Real quick, you've also won a ton of awards. And the one that really, you hear all these great awards and accolades that people with Forbes 30 under 30, and, there's these different ones. But the one that I saw that was amazing, and I think it's well-deserved, is you won the best inventions of 2019. And it's so funny. You would imagine, I was the CEO of the world's first smartphone. And we won these types of awards, the best gadget, they would call it. They didn't even call them smartphones in 99. It was convergence devices. But it's so interesting that here we are 20 years after I won the best inventions of 1999 with the world's first Microsoft Windows CE device, manufactured by Samsung, hyper technical with an HP Bluetooth stylus and everything, that 20 years later, somebody would ask me, geez, if you're winning the best invention of 1999, what's 2019's best invention going to be? And if someone told me cereal, are you kidding me? That just shows you.
Listen, I'm not the judge. I'm not sure I would have picked cereal.
So but technologically, think about the impact on the earth. It's great that convergence devices are there and smartphones, et cetera. But let's be honest, somebody that can create a cereal that tastes this good, you deserve to win the best invention of the world. If somebody can to take half the foods that I love and make it taste as good as Magic Spoon, I'll give them the goddamn Nobel Peace Prize. I'm serious. So it's fine with me. Let's be honest. The real value in life is to enjoy life, and people wish they could enjoy foods that taste good and don't kill them, right? We've turned, food from disease into medicine, medicine into disease. You've taken a disease food and turned it back into a medicine. You deserve it. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. Last thing, because you have been successful in building a business, and I really wanted to hone in on this idea of building a business virtually. You started the business before the pandemic, building it in a traditional way. How do you plan on building this now moving forward as the vaccine starts putting us into the third or fourth quarter of this, different type of living? Where do you see the transition out of the pandemic and using some sort of blend of traditional and virtual worlds to figure out your business? Do you have any plans, or have you thought about what you're going to do next?
We think about it a lot, and it's funny. I keep on reading these articles saying that every company is realizing that work is going to be completely different, and we're going to morph into a 3-day work week with 2 days in the office and 3 days on Zoom. And everyone's realized you can be just as productive virtually. And we've had the opposite realization. We've realized actually we're really productive when we're all together, and we're getting through right now. It's totally fine, but it's definitely not optimal. Communication's harder. I think, especially for most of our team is pretty young. Most of them are living in New York, many of them living alone in New York. It's really hard, especially in the winter for our young team. Some of them graduated college, moved to New York, got their own apartment, and then the pandemic hit, and now they're by themselves all day, every day, right? So I think both from like a culture perspective, a happiness perspective, and a productivity perspective, for us, being all in one place, being able to see each other, talk to each other, jump in a room, hash out a debate, it's so much better for face-to-face. So I'm looking forward to when that's possible. We're certainly not doing that currently, but we will as soon as we can.
That's amazing. And I love the counterintuitive belief of expanding a business. And I do believe that personal contact, and it's too bad that most of your employees didn't get hired after the pandemic because the rents in New York have gone down so much. What a great time to move to the city. It will rebound. I think it will rebound for the very reason you're saying, is that personal interaction, as much as it may not be as efficient, I think productivity is going down in a lot of respects because engagement's so difficult when we sit by ourselves, especially as winter is hitting. It's very difficult to stay inspired and connected to that which inspires us. Well, you have certainly been inspirational and educational for me as an entrepreneur. I certainly appreciate the cereal, especially gifted over the holidays to me. It was so excited to meet you and to thank you for that. And my whole breakfast and late night eating routines have changed because of you. And I know a lot of people tell me I changed their life. Gabi Lewis, you've changed my life. Thank you so much. It tastes so good. It's unbelievable. Here we have it, Gabi Lewis, the co-founder of Magic Spoon.